Afternoon.
Yes. We want smiles on your faces because we're about to go vote. Yay! Oh, you already voted? Oh, okay. So, again, my name is Reverend Marlon Tillman. I'm the pastor here at Ames United Methodist Church. And I want to just state our program, welcome you, and then have an opening prayer, and then I will read an introduction of our moderator, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So our objective is to educate citizens about the candidates for the House of Representatives, District 1, and to participate in early voting. It is our hope that for those of you who have not voted yet, that you will join us as we caravan down to the early voting center and cast your vote. Now, the best part about it is these candidates thought it was important enough to meet with you today, so you get to hear the passion in their hearts about their platform, and hopefully some of your questions can also be answered. As you know, on the well, I'll let the moderator handle the rest. So again, welcome. Gracious God, we thank you for allowing us to gather here on this afternoon for these concerned citizens who want to hear from potential candidates who might be our leaders in the very near future. God, we pray that what they express to us will be sincere, but more importantly, that we will discern who is the best person for us to put into office to represent us as public servants. So God, just allow us to have discernment of spirit, and may we do so in decency and in order. We ask all of this in the precious name of God the Almighty. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I want to introduce our speaker for today, our moderator for today. Very good friend of mine by the name of Cornelius Scott III. And Cornelius is a veteran of organizers and relationship building with an impressive resume of delivering successful outcomes. Cornelius has over 25 years of professional training and experience. As a managing lobbyist for Farmers Insurance Group, he has led corporate advocacy in the Mid-Atlantic region for 17 years. His personal manager and strategic thinking earned him high regard amongst his industry peers. He took home his farmer's highest departmental recognition 3 times during the last 7 years of his company's tenure. Mr. Scott has earned equal regard as a community advocate and activist. His acknowledgments include recognition from Maryland's Legislative Black Caucus, Harford County Government, Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, and Baltimore City Mayors Catherine Pugh and Stephanie Rawlins Blake. Mr. Scott was the founding executive director for the nonprofit Mothers of Murdered Sons and Daughters United Incorporated, also known as MOMS. As MOMS executive director, he brought national attention to the organization, including mention in the Christian Science Monitor. He developed the organization's model for survivor support, and he launched a successful fundraising campaign for the organization. Cornelius is the founder of the African American Democratic Club, one of our sponsors today in Harford County, and Baltimore City, Maryland. He has managed political campaigns throughout the state. He is an internet talk show blogger and has been a guest on morning public affairs programs Square Off and Richard Shear and 11 TV Hill and Jason Newton. Mr. Scott's most recent ventures include the launch of the Family Survivors Network, a nonprofit providing support to families victimized by homicide, and opening Reliable Partners Agency, a full-service independent insurance agency. Cornelius holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Baltimore and a master's in contemporary communication from the College of Notre Dame of Maryland. Mr. Scott is a proud member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, Incorporated, and blessed father of 2 children, Pez Alexander Scott, 24, and I am Alexander Scott, age 22. So although he looks like a young man, unless he had those children when he was 2, he's quite an older young man. And so let us give him a warm welcome as he comes to moderate us.
Thank you so much, and first let me say how warming it is to see your faces. I've been a Harford County resident for a little bit of time, and it's just very exciting to see so many deliberate Democrats in the room. There is a deliberate energy that I see in your faces. There is a deliberate energy that I feel in the room. My recent reading has really been about this whole energy thing and the vibrations that energy emotes. And I feel those vibrations. And so I'd like you guys to celebrate with a clap of hands for your energy. For your energy. It's your energy. We're going to jump right in. And they've been very good here to keep me scripted. Good afternoon and welcome to an afternoon to educate your vote before going to the polls. The right to vote has not been available to many, and you guys are exercising your deliberate intent to get involved in this process by participation here today. The Candidates Forum is a crucial step to selecting a public servant that matches your self-interest for a better Harford County, a better Maryland, and a better America. This will be the format for our forum. We have 7 pre-selected questions that the candidates were given to reply to, and we hope that you will have questions yourselves that are equally important. So here's some instructions. Write your questions on the index cards you were given. And this is Delane Lewis Extraordinaire. Listen, Delane, TWW, you guys love you. I've got to take the moment. Can I pause?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If anybody needs a card, I have them, and then I'll go through and pick up some too.
So you can write your questions on the index card you were given. Feel free to use both sides if you are very excited. Raise your card and we will collect them from you. We will intermingle your questions with the 7 questions that they've been provided. I will read questions as they are given to me, so please print and be concise with your questions. In other words, make it one question without parts. Likewise, make sure the questions do not have a yes or no answer, because we won't use those. We want to hear clear and thoughtful answers from these candidates, because we want to be informed. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to present their platform first. They will be given 1 minute warning, followed by a stop sign from the timekeeper in the back of the room. Timekeeper, where are you? There we go. Okay. Timekeeper in the front of the room. Great. So we're all set there. We've got our timekeeper. All right. And during the Q&A segment, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to reply to a question, and again given 1 minute warning, followed by a stop sign. Where's that stop sign? Stop. Yeah, there we go. Stop sign from the timekeeper. There will be no grandstanding. Candidates are asked to use the microphones and remain seated during their responses. Water is available for the candidates and citizens at the table. So where's the water table? We've got the water table.
It's up front.
Up front, over here. Okay. Very good. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, we will begin with the introduction of the candidates. All right. And everyone's looking very excited. So I'm going to start, I guess, from right to left. The first candidate we have here is Allison Galbraith. Allison? The next candidate is Michael Pullen.
Yes.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Michael. The next candidate, I don't have the name. Let's get this.
Erik.
Oh, okay, let's make sure I get Erik's information here. Erik, and bear with me here. Erik, come on forward. And our final candidate is Mr. Jesse Colvin. Thank you, each of you, for coming out today. And let's get the show on the road. I guess we will open up with your statements, with your opening statements, and we will start right here with Mr. Erik Lane, because I messed you up before. So go ahead, Erik. You've got your 2 minutes. 3 minutes.
First, I'll start with, can you guys hear me okay?
Use the mic.
Use the mic.
Recording?
Use the
Oh,
mic.
I stay seated too, huh? Oh, okay. Sorry, Mike doesn't get an advantage for being the tallest here. Very good. All right, hi everybody. My name's Erik Lane. I grew up here in Harford County, and I went to North Hartford long ago. I live up in North Hartford today. I own a horse farm. We do grow some products as well. I went to University of Maryland, a mechanical engineering degree. Went off to Silicon Valley, became an entrepreneur, and moved back here to Harford County. My parents were a hairdresser and a Baltimore County cop. So I grew up a pretty normal life, like most of us around here, with middle-class family and opportunities, that would be expected in this part of the world. So it drove me, what drove me to politics, and it's recent as of 3 months ago, I am the latest entrant into this race, is we've got to a point of where I think a lot of us put our head down in shame when we look at Congress. And I think maybe more so than other places, we do it here in our district. We've found a candidate in Andy who does not represent us, has no interest in representing us. He was bought and paid for by the healthcare industry and the NRA. And it's unfortunate for all of us to be in this position when we truly don't have representation. I think beyond that, we find ourselves having a candidate or having a congressman who doesn't have the respect of his own peers in Congress. And that really puts us in a place, at least for all of us up in the front here, to recognize that there's a time for change, and now is it. And we'll mention this later on as well, but we've all agreed that regardless of which of us wins here at the end of the week, we are fully committed to supporting one another to defeat Andy. The areas that I primarily focus in is I think that we need to have a little reformation in education. We're still teaching like it's 1950. We believe college is the right answer for everybody, and I think there's a place for vocational work to make it more robust in society. I think we have issues around healthcare that are tragic. They are costing us a lot of money. It has turned into, from an avenue of mercy, into an investment. And the investors have perverted the medical industry so badly that we're all paying the price for it, whether it's prescriptions or services or anything like that. We have pensions that are under a lot of duress, and that's going to cause a lot of problems in the future. So I'm a fiscal conservative. I have a little bit different take on things. Being on a farm, we use guns, so basic Second Amendment rights are good. But those are the primary things that we do, that my candidacy is about, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Allison Galbraith, your 3 minutes.
Who wants to repeal and replace Andy Harris? So, I'm Allison Galbraith. I am a product of Bel Air. I grew up in historic Bel Air. I could walk to the Kleins down on Main Street from where my house was. I graduated from Bel Air High School, as did my brother. My sister graduated from Ballston High School. And I stayed in the area for college. I went to University of Maryland. Actually, first I got my associate's degree at Harford Community College, where my father taught for 45 years. And then I went to University of Maryland and got a bachelor's degree in philosophy with a focus in ethics and logic. And it seemed like a smarter decision than majoring in art. But I stayed local until after college, and then I married the boy next door, who was a soldier, an enlisted combat veteran. And I went out to Fort Hood, Texas, which gave me a totally different perspective on many of the issues that we face. And when I had my son, I said, we need to come back. And we came back to be near my parents, who now live down in Joppa. We're still local. And I started a career at Aberdeen Proving Ground, right here. I've been here my whole life. I went back to grad school at University of Maryland for public policy with a specialization in federal acquisition. And I've made it my business to understand how the federal government operates, and I specialize in federal acquisition streamlining and program management. I've been doing that for a decade now. I had zero intention of ever getting into politics because it seemed like a disgusting, dirty game that I wasn't interested in playing. And then I went to my congressman because life had happened, right? My mom had a series of strokes. I got laid off because I couldn't do 9 to 5 without the calls during the day. And when I got separated and then divorced, I would have lost my health insurance if it weren't for the protections for women built into the Affordable Care Act. So I went to go see Andy Harris, and I explained that. And I said, will you vote against anything which allows for gender rate hikes? And he says, well, I don't think most people would mind if women paid a little more for health insurance. And 3 days later, my mother, she passed away, and she'd been a healthcare advocate, an advocate for universal healthcare and addressing racial disparities in healthcare for her entire career. And it seems so ridiculous that here's our congressman, somebody who's supposed to work for us, wanting to threaten not just my livelihood, but the one silver lining of some of the most difficult years of my entire life. And I decided it was time to take government back, that we deserve a representative who's going to work for us, that we deserve a representative who knows that their job is to be responsive, to be available, to advocate on our behalf, and that requires listening and showing up and having some compassion and an understanding of the issues that everyday people face, which he does not. I believe every family, regardless of shape, color, or size, deserves the tools and resources that they need to live and to earn a living and support themselves and to retire in comfort. And given what I do, streamlining, I know that we don't need more government or more spending to do it. We just need to be smarter with it. It's time to stop, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. Michael Pullen.
So my name is Michael Pullen. I want to thank you all for being here and thank you all for your commitment and enthusiasm, because we're in a difficult time, as we all recognize, and we're all going to be part of the solution. So thank you. My dad came home from World War II. He moved to Holden, West Virginia. He worked in the mines. I'm the fifth of 7. 7 years after that, he was working in Manhattan. He was a mining engineer, not afraid to roll up his sleeves and get to work with people who do the work. I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, which is a suburb of New York City. Went to school at Boston College and graduated and went to law school in Boston, moved to the Eastern Shore the day of my final exam in law school, my last exam. Live in the same house that my wife and I bought 40 years ago. Became a public defender. One of the early cases, I had 2 brothers, 9 and 10 years old. They were living with their grandma, who was a wonderful woman but a little bit overwhelmed. They got into some hijinks and the state wanted to take them away, put them in a juvenile facility. So we fought that and fought hard, and we won. 40 years later, when I was the county attorney at Talbot County, I'm in a work group. I see a new guy at the work group and hadn't seen him before, so I introduced myself. He told me his name. He said, I represented a kid like that when he was 10. He said, that was me. And he said, do you remember what you told me? And I said, no, I don't. He said, you said that life is hard, and sometimes it's easy to make the wrong choice. And he carried that with him for 40 years. And he gave that back to me. And it was a real gift, because it reminded me and reaffirmed the reasons that I had become a trial lawyer in the first place. So in 1993, about 25 years ago, I became the county attorney for Talbot County. I worked with both Republicans and Democrats, drafting legislation to solve problems and work for people. I'm the only candidate that's held public office. And I was good at that. I liked my job, did some good things. But when I saw what was happening in Congress and in national politics, I decided to resign from that job to run for Congress. The reason I did was because Congress needs help. Congress is broken. I'm 67. My kids are all grown. They're all through college. They're out on their own. They've got kids of their own. And I felt it was time for me to give back. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm here. We need universal health care. We need free public tuition at universities and colleges, and we need education, not incarceration. We need to protect the Bay and the environment. And that's what I will do as your representative in Congress. Thank you very much for coming, and let's do this.
Thank you so much. Jesse Colvin.
Hi, my first name is Jesse. My last name is Colvin. That's spelled C-O-L-V-I-N if you're going to the polls. By way of introduction, I'm a fourth-generation Marylander. We arrived, a family of immigrants, in 1899. And if you flash forward to my parents are big hippies. When my dad met my mom, he had three things. He had his VW van, he had his beard, and he had his ponytail. And my dad has been in the public defender's office in our state my entire life, and my mom, who's really kind of the boss, is a judge. She's a district court judge. I'm very sure they had a law school picked out for me when I was born. All that changed on September 11th. And September 11th, as a senior in high school, inspired me to study Arabic in college and Middle East history in college, and then I went to Syria after college. And I taught English to Iraqi refugees. This was 2006. So you can imagine how my students felt about the Bush administration. They detested the Bush administration. But some had served as interpreters and translators for men and women on the ground, troops and diplomats. That had a huge impact on me. And I came home and I joined the military. I served as an intelligence officer in the Army Rangers. I served 4 combat deployments to Afghanistan. My campaign manager, Carlos, who's just stepped out, served 2 with me, side by side. Oh, there's Carlos, raising his hand in the back. After the military, I worked inside an investment bank, not to seek a personal fortune, but if you remember the housing crisis and the reckless and irresponsible behavior that caused the housing crisis, we were the internal fraud team. It was our job to stop that, find that next set of reckless and irresponsible behavior. My wife and I really have every reason not to be doing this campaign. We just celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary. My son is 9 weeks old this week. He was out knocking doors this morning with me. At some point after the presidential election, there was no lightning bolt moment, but I turned to my wife and said, we got to do something. My wife runs a nonprofit to prevent military veteran suicide, so she said, I'm doing pretty good work, you go figure it out. And here we are. Our platform, I want to tell you very quickly, I don't think being against something is enough to win this thing. I think our anger and our frustration gets you in the room. For you to walk out with your vote or to support us or to knock a door for us, we got to be for something. So here's what we're for. Whether it's Bel Air or Harford County or this district, it is a fantastic place to raise a family. We have got to give our young people a reason to stay. That is jobs of the future, jobs like solar and cyber. We have to attack with every ounce of political energy the urgent problems of right now. That's the opioids epidemic. That is certainly healthcare. There are 54,000 people in our district who rely on the ACA. We have to protect them. And I want to get to 10 billion oysters in Chesapeake Bay by 2025. We have a great deal of our volunteers in the room. If you could raise your hands very quickly, including our county captain. We have an event at the library at 2 o'clock. We'd love to see you. Anyone on my team or volunteers can give you information about it. And the last thing is just to echo what Erik said. We are committed to running a very serious and a very positive campaign. In the event we don't win the nomination, whoever the nominee is will have my full support, and I will make sure that all of our supporters support whoever the nominee as well. I think it's an incredibly important thing, and I want you to hear it from me as well. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock, library, or 2:30 in the back. Thank you very much.
Very good. Harford County, I think we should be excited. We've got some fine candidates, don't we? Got some fine candidates, and I want to just take a brief moment and just recognize, and I'd like to say thank you to the church family here at Ames United Methodist for setting up this event and allowing us to use this venue. This is a fantastic ministry here. Wonderful. Thank you so much. The Reverend here, Mr. Marlon Tillman, just dynamite person, dynamite people, and good guy all the way around. And I've just been so blessed that I came across him 3.5, 4 years ago by chance, and he was in Baltimore City at the time, and who knew that he was going to come out here to Harford County. It's just this universe thing is pretty interesting. So we've come through the introductions, and we'll move on to the speed round. All right, and so I'm going to open up with one of the questions. Okay, this is a bunch of questions. Okay, here we go. And why do you feel you are the best candidate to defeat Andy Harris in a traditionally red Republican district? And this is open to everyone, I guess. And let's begin where we left off, and we'll run back up. So, Mr. Colvin?
This election is a referendum on Andy Harris. That's part of how you beat him. This is not left versus right. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is a gerrymandered district, as we all know. So for a Democrat to win this seat, you have to knit together a coalition that goes from the far left to the center to the disaffected right. Part of how we're going to beat them is we're outworking them. We have 300 volunteers at this point. We are out knocking doors. Every time I see my volunteers, I talk about toenails, because we all need to be losing toenails because we're knocking so many doors. Part of it is fundraising. We think this is the second largest district east of Mississippi. It is 3.5 hours from Tawnytown, Carroll County to Ocean Pines, Worcester. You can't shake every hand, and I've tried. I'm doing 600 miles a week in the truck. If at the beginning of the campaign, if 3 people wanted to meet us in Salisbury, we were there. If 5 people wanted to meet us in Finksburg, we were there. If you're familiar with the National Outdoor Show in Dorchester County where they eat muskrat, I ate the muskrat in Church Creek. Part of it is you have to have the resources to communicate with voters. We outraised Andy Harris in our first quarter, and nobody had any idea who I was. That was just a product of hard work. Our endorsements tell a pretty good story of how we're building this coalition from the far left to the center to the disaffected right. We have the endorsement of a Bernie Sanders chapter in Cecil County. We have the AFL-CIO and AFSCME. That is labor. That is working families represented in our district. We have national level endorsements. An organization called Vote Vets. Vote Vets, if you were a military veteran running in 2018, Vote Vets is the national stamp of approval. We are incredibly blessed and humbled to have the endorsement by former Congressman Wade Gilchrist. That represents the disaffected right. He is still a Republican. He and I do not agree on everything. He's also a Marine and I'm a Ranger, so we argue about who's tougher. The last part is you need a serious message and you need a serious campaign. I briefly mentioned our message. It's not enough to be against something. It really isn't. You got to be inspired. Our anger is what got us in this room. And the last thing is it comes down to relationships. This job, to win this seat and to do this job effectively, comes down to bridging relationships across gaps. And it's not just gaps in age or gender or race. It's gaps in the form of culture, in the form of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And you got to be able to speak waterman, and you got to be able to speak oyster farmer, and you got to be able to speak farmer, and you got to be able to speak opioids.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Pullen.
Thank you. So the question is, why am I the best candidate? I've got 40 years of experience as a trial lawyer. I have been in the arena, fighting for justice for folks for my entire career. I have lived in the 1st District and represented folks in the 1st District for my entire career. I have been the Talbot County attorney for about 25 years. I've worked with both Democrats and Republicans on 7 different councils, solving problems, drafting legislation. One of the things I did, I drafted a bill to protect the Chesapeake Bay that was so effective that the following year, the Maryland General Assembly adopted that as a model for statewide legislation and adopted it statewide, and that bill, that model is still in effect today, protecting the Bay. And as a result of that, I got the endorsement of the Sierra Club for my environmental work. I've been in this race for about a year. I've been throughout the district. It's a huge district. We have gone from the first day on the basis of getting out the vote. In 1993, I ran for president of the Easton Town Council, and I knew it was going to be a tough race because the incumbent was from there, and I was someone who had come there. Our task was to get out the vote. We increased voter turnout by 100%. By the energy, by knocking on doors, by making the calls. That's what we're doing in this race. We've got volunteers. We've got 400 volunteers. We've been knocking doors since August, making calls since August. And that's the way we win this race. And we win this race on Harris's record. He tried to take health care away from 23 million Americans. He has created a disaster on the Eastern Shore from this anti-immigrant policy that has basically destroyed the H-2B visa program and has shut down a number of seafood processing plants. The administration, with their tariffs on China, they're going to create, and I see the stop sign, so I'll honor that. But thank you very much.
Very good. Allison?
So, we do need a coalition to take back this district. We do. I was in Cambridge the other day, and a young woman came, and I parked the car, and she came and she tapped on the glass, and there were a bunch of signs in the back. She was pointing at a sign. She said, "I want one of those." And I said, "Okay." And as I'm reaching back to grab the sign, this young woman says, "You know, I hate politics. I hate it. I don't follow it. I never vote." She said, "But that woman, Allison Galbraith, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to vote for her. And not just because I want her to be my representative." She actually said, "Because I want Allison Galbraith to be my president one day." And then she followed that up and she said, "Because she's one of us." Because she's one of us. We've heard that before from extraordinary members of Congress, or about them, right? Barbara Mikulski. Barbara Mikulski was one of the people. The ability to bridge the class divide among citizens is very, very important because we have a government that is not working for 98% of the people here. So I have a coalition across the entire political spectrum. We've been out knocking doors for over a year now. And when it comes to resources, I don't think anybody handling tax dollars needs to say, well, we need to know how to bring in more resources. We need to figure out how to spend it better. And my return on investment is about 10 to 1 from anybody on here because I figured out how to use social media to my advantage. And I now have a social media platform coming out of this district that is bigger than half of Maryland's sitting congressional delegation. I have almost 3,000 different small donors because it's not just enough to say we're going to take it back. You have to fix the process so that anybody can compete in this system too. I have hundreds of volunteers. And I work with the government's most complicated regulatory processes and save the federal government money for a living. That means I can have a conversation with a Republican just as easily as I can a Democrat. But I can also round up our disenfranchised voters, our persuadables. I flipped literally hundreds of Republicans to Democrat prior to June 5th cutoff, just for this primary. That's what I've demonstrated, And that's what we need, and we need the enthusiasm and the inspiration and a very, very excited group of people to do this. They're behind me.
Thank you very much. Erik Lane.
So, why me? Why over Andy? We all know this is a gerrymandered district, significantly, on the order of 60-40. We have to hope that they're not going to show up to the polls to one degree come November. The other part is we have to understand what are the hot issues that drive the decisions at the polls. For those disaffected Republicans, for those Republicans that think, you know what, things are broken and it might be an opportunity for change. I bridge the issues that separate Democrats and Republicans. There's a few topics that, through this campaign, will drive the Republicans crazy and make them a force that will make it a big challenge for any of us to overcome. We can't talk about new taxes in this campaign. We can't talk about gun control, by and large, in this campaign, because this is an NRA district, if you aren't aware. It is very much so. And we can't talk about giveaways. We have to talk about fiscal responsibility. Those issues are the points that will get the disaffected Republicans to come our way. My candidacy is based on fiscal conservatism. It understands the rural nature that makes up the vast majority of this district. We are that big because we're so spread out. Farmers make up a big part of that. People that live in rural areas. We need people that they understand to be a candidate on that final ballot come November. If somebody they don't understand is on that ballot, they will not vote for us. They need to have that relationship. That's what I bring. I bring that relationship with that community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to one of the pre-selected questions. What is your position on universal Medicaid, single payer, and how would you improve the current health care delivery system? And we'll begin at Erik Lane's side of the table.
So, single payer is a future state, I believe. I don't believe that it's a today thing that we can accomplish. If it sounds simple in concept, but it's a hugely complex transition that would need to occur over the course of probably a decade for us to get to a single payer solution. And the reason for that is normal supply and demand economics don't work in the healthcare industry anymore. You have investors that own healthcare. You have conflict of issues that are now blurry between doctor and ownership of practices that result in much higher costs for all of us. They have relationships with the drug prescription or the drug manufacturers that they push the drug because they get kickbacks. Whether it's direct financial kickbacks or other kickbacks, they get the kickbacks. It's a perverse system that's not designed to help the efficacy of the diagnosis, nor is it there to help the cost control that we would think is inherent in a practice of mercy. Finally, this industry is driven by middlemen. This is people with my type of training in an MBA program who are totally designed to maximize revenue for the industry and not pay attention to its effects on the consumer, because the consumer in their eyes is an insurance company. They don't deal with who collects money for the insurance company and sees our rates go through the roof all the time. That needs to change. So the primary policy initiative that we have to take in order to get the first step in this game is have a national rate sheet around services and prescription drugs. If we can say that we have some government-controlled rates, then we'll find an answer for that 10-year goal. Thank you.
Allison Galbraith.
The best program, healthcare program, that I've ever dealt with, by far, was the Maryland Children's Health Insurance Program, which my children used prior to ACA, when I personally couldn't buy a policy because I'm a woman who had a complicated pregnancy. And the reason that I liked CHIP was because it covered vision, it covered dental, It covered mental health. It covered prescriptions. Everything was free and it was means-based. So if you could afford a little bit, then you paid $47 a month per child and everything was covered. We had many a chin stitched back together using that CHIP programs with toddlers. And I believe that that's what we should be working towards. We should be shooting for the moon because we know that what we're going to get depends on how much of a majority we have in Congress. Why would we settle for less than we actually deserve and what we actually need? I mean, teeth are medically necessary but won't be covered by Medicare. And there are a lot of problems, and part of it is cost control. Maryland has a fantastic all-payer system which has significantly reduced the healthcare cost, and that can be expanded nationally to drive down the cost while we work towards a universal system that ought to be a right for people, because nobody should be making major life decisions based on the availability of healthcare in their lives.
Michael Pullen.
So I'm a strong supporter and proponent of Medicare for all, universal coverage. We are the wealthiest nation in the world. We pay more than any other nation in the world for our health care, $9,600 per person per year. Canada, by contrast, pays about $4,600, and they have universal coverage. Prior to the ACA, 45,000 Americans died every year from lack of access to health care. When I started this campaign last August, I was at the Talbot County Ag Fair, and I was talking to a vendor. A friend of hers had been diagnosed with cancer, didn't have coverage, and we know the course of that disease. She died with stage 4, finally being admitted to the hospital to die. We can do better. We've got to do better. How do we improve the current system? We expand CHIP upward. We make CHIP coverage consistent with Medicare coverage, and we expand Medicare downward in the age groups, and we bring them together. This is what we can do. This is what we have to do. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to each other. We owe it to the future generations. We owe it to those of us with pre-existing conditions, with illnesses that will kill them or their children or their loved ones or their family members. And this is an urgent priority for me. So thank you very much.
I personally think healthcare is a right, plain and simple. There's a term, ALICE families. ALICE is asset limited, income constrained, employed. It's basically the families who are one carburetor away from next month having to choose between medicine and rent. In our district, it's 37% of working families. There are far too many medical bankruptcies, or bankruptcies that start with a medical bill. I think we're all going to be on Medicare sooner rather than later and wonder what took so long. The plan I would support is from a left-leaning think tank in Washington, D.C. called the Center for American Progress. It does 3 things. Number 1, it takes CHIP and Medicaid and brings it under the Medicare umbrella. The second thing is it allows for an opt-in. So if you're an individual or a small business and you want to opt into Medicare, you can. And the third thing is it allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices just like the VA does. There's no reason Medicare should be allowed to negotiate drug prices. But we have to, step 1 is there are 54,000 people in our district who rely on the Affordable Care Act. Andy Harris has tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act every chance he had with no backup plan. Step 1 has to be to protect those 54,000 people. By the way, not for nothing, there are 50,000 jobs in our district in the healthcare industry. It's the largest employer. And I've gone around and I've talked to leadership from all the hospital systems in our district. If you took away the ACA tomorrow, 5% of those jobs go away overnight. That's 2,500 jobs. Step 1 is protecting those 54,000 people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question. Income inequality is growing. How do you propose to address these issues and strengthen job and retirement security among American workers? And we'll begin at this right at the at Jesse's end of the table.
Does that mean me?
Yeah.
Andy Harris brought Speaker Paul Ryan to our district, to Kent County, to Carroll County to stump for the tax bill. And before the tax bill came out, Speaker Ryan said, don't worry about Social Security, don't worry about Medicare, we're not going to have to touch it. And then a week later, all of a sudden, it's 2024 and 2026, those programs will be empty. We have to protect, but not just protect, we have to fight for, like cats and dogs, and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. That's part of it. The other part is community colleges. Community college ought to be the on-ramp to the middle class. Community college could and should be free. That is a great way to address income inequality. And it's programs that make sense in our district, because we're not a district of smokestacks, and we're not a district of computer chips. But solar would work, cyber would work. If we're on the Eastern Shore, I'm talking about oysters. Oysters would work. We're going to need a new tax bill. We are absolutely going to need a new tax bill. And the last thing is, if you look at our environmental platform, 10 billion oysters will do wonders for the environment, but it's also going to be an economic engine, because if you invest in the environment in our district, it will be good for jobs. It will create jobs, and those jobs will address income inequality. And it all comes down to those 37% of families. 37% of our families in our district are one carburetor away. They need to be protected if they have the ACA. They need programs. They need jobs, and it has to come through the community colleges. Community colleges could and should be the on-ramp to the middle class. That is the best way to address income inequality. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So income inequality is bad, and it's getting worse. The tax bill that the Republicans just passed next year on your tax return, if you're in the bottom 20%, you can expect an additional $60. If you're in the middle 20%, you can expect an additional $960. If you're in the top 1/10 of 1%, you can expect an additional, and listen to this, $193,000. That's an outrage. We need to undo that tax bill. We need a progressive tax system where corporations and the billionaires pay their fair share. We have 18 profitable international corporations who've paid no income tax for the last 8 years. Zero. That's wrong. We need to fix that. 83% of the tax benefits for this recent tax bill went to the top 1%. So how do we fix it? First of all, we undo that tax bill. We invest in education. I'm in favor of free tuition at public universities and colleges and job training. Social Security. We have to strengthen Social Security. Right now, in the Social Security Trust Fund, $2.9 trillion, money that's already been paid in by workers and employers, already paid in. We can guarantee the solvency of Social Security by eliminating the cap. Right now, if you make more than $127,000 a year, you don't pay any more Social Security. If we eliminated that cap, that would guarantee the solvency of Social Security for another 75 years. Easy fix, something we need to do. So those are the things that I would do to reduce income inequality, strengthen our job and our retirement security among working Americans. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Income inequality is growing. How do you propose to address these issues and strengthen job and retirement security among American workers?
Okay, so this isn't like a simple fix issue by any means. Income inequality is growing along socioeconomic status lines, but it's also, you still have income disparities between men and women. You still have income disparities for people of color. And we need to make sure that we're strengthening protections against pay discrimination in those areas, because it's ridiculous that you'd have two people doing the same job but not making the same amount of money. And Another thing that we need to do for workers is to protect unions. And we need to strengthen collective bargaining rights. We need to make sure that they are preserved, because they're the ones out there fighting for better wages, for pensions. And those pensions help support retirement. It's something that without it, my parents, that mess would have been so much worse. We need to expand Social Security to be a livable amount. We shouldn't have people retiring and then living in poverty. And we can assist caregivers, and we can make sure that there are protections there, and we can make sure that people who have family obligations are not losing their jobs over it. That should not happen to anybody. And then we can also increase education, and we can invest in our HBCUs, and we can make sure that we are addressing, via the education system, some of the racial and gender disparities that we have in pay. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and it needs to be a priority, and it also needs to be a perspective that somebody holds, because when you live a problem or it's close to you, you're that much more likely to want to address it. And I know what that one looks like as a single mom. I don't know all of it, but I promise to help and fight for equal wages and equal opportunity for everybody.
I met with a friend I hadn't seen since I graduated high school last night. He told me there's 700 applicants each year for Harvard Tech, and 250 get accepted. And the real irony, or the real tragedy perhaps, in the reason is, well, they don't have enough people to teach the mandatory math and science and English requirements to meet the graduate degree program. But he's got 10 kids in his class for his specific vocation. So one of the major challenges is, let's make programs, vocational programs, more effective at delivering kids when they're 18 into a job. Getting them into the tax base right away, not fighting with, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for college? How am I going to get started in my life? Oh, I have 4 more years to figure this out. I think a lot of us are frustrated that many of us came out of high school and we had work, or we were very well engaged with college. Times need to change again, where people coming out of high school are ready to join the workforce. Not kick it down the road another 5 or 10 years while they figure out what they're going to do and they stay living at home. We need to take some responsibility. On the other side, I'm an entrepreneur. I start companies. I turn them into something. I hire workers. We need to make, that is the core of what makes America great, is we have people that are restless when it comes to, can things be better? And we need to continue to show that that entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well. Things like this canceling of net neutrality, that completely ruins the entrepreneurial spirit, because it means that the big guy can buy his way into your access to people's home moving forward. That completely strips away that motivation and that drive when you know that the odds are stacked against you. Issues around equal pay are things that we can handle in a Congress. But they're complex too, because you can always write that same problem into different terms, and it's going to make it very hard to legislate that one. But I think there's steps that we can take, and there's good practice out there. Around the retirement pension problem, we know that's a big one coming. I think the primary way we're going to do it, get people into the tax base sooner so that they're paying into the system, and then secondarily, maybe raise that final amount from $60,000 to $100,000 of income that actually goes towards Social Security, so that we can kick the can a little bit farther down the road. But we know that it has some long-term challenges that make it perhaps not feasible in the years to come, in the decades to come. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. For just a brief moment before I go to the next question, I want to recognize there are a number of candidates in the room for other offices. I'm going to just ask those candidates if you'll stand for a moment, please. There's one. Where are the other candidates? I know there are a few. There we go. Sir, we'll start over here. Who are you?
My name is Shura Davis, and I'm running for Harford County Democratic Central Committee. This is my first time ever running, and I met Miss Allison at the Democrat Party. Great woman. I'm a little nervous. I wasn't.
That's fine. That's it. I just want you to introduce. Go ahead, sir.
Gordon Kerr, I live in Joppa Town. I'm running for the Harford County Democratic Central Committee. And after the 26th, I'll be running heavily for delegate for the 7th District.
Excellent. Go ahead.
I'm Allison Berkowitz. I'm running for the House of Delegates in District 7. I'm a teacher and a social worker. Very nice to be here with y'all.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Just thought I'd shine a little light. We got, the benches go. We got to get a bench out here. So the next question. How would you propose to address the rapid expansion of the U.S. deficit? And we'll begin, with Erik Lane.
So it's funny, I have a business degree from very good colleges in the country. We have this thing called Wall Street that seems to drive the global economy. Then when you go to ask this particular question, you run into all kinds of conflict in responses from the best economics professors in the world. Some say, since we have the biggest economy in the world and we drive everything, we can spend freely until there's no tomorrow because there's no counter option in the world other than the U.S. economy to bet on. And so that message obviously made its way to Congress. And we run into another $1 trillion in debt because somebody thinks there's no long-term problem. On the opposite side, we have people who probably look at it from a more moral and ethical viewpoint to get to the other end of the equation, which is to say, do we have a responsibility to our own citizens, especially now in good times, to take control of our finances when, in theory, with unemployment as low as it is, we should have lots of money to maybe stash away for a darker day. Because I'm not resting assured that every day is going to be as bright as today is. That we will have challenges, whether that's through this trade war nonsense, whether it's through genuine wars in the Middle East that we seem to get roped into, or anything else in the future that would cause that kind of problem. I think that we have an obligation to show the next generation of children that we have half a clue how to manage a checkbook, and that that's important for the United States in its future. So if you take that view where I'm personally responsible for my money, I believe we should take that same view for our government, that they should be personally responsible for our money. Thank you.
As a start, we need to fix the recent tax bill that was passed. Now, reducing taxes for middle and working class Americans puts money back into the economy. Increasing wages for middle class and working Americans creates additional tax revenue. That would help. And we need to close a lot of these corporate tax loopholes because, frankly, it's welfare. It's corporate welfare. And the people need to come first. But also understanding that, if corporations want tax breaks, then they can pay their people enough that they can raise a family without being dependent on government assistance. That seems pretty simple to me. We can stop getting into unnecessary wars. It's a lot of our money, is the Department of Defense budget, and I work to streamline programs and do them faster and cheaper and find ways to manage them on smaller budgets. This is what I excel at, is finding cheaper ways to manage complicated processes. We can go after federal acquisition reform, and things like even passing a budget on time waste billions of dollars a year. These continuing resolutions, year after year, waste billions of dollars. We can, have Congress work. That would be a start to do their job, to pass a budget on time and make sense out of the federal budget, because we don't need more federal spending, we need smarter federal spending. And that is my background. We can find these savings if we go after the way that government is operating and the way that we're approaching our budget process. Not only that, but it's important to understand, and any program manager would say, that investments up front often have a very high return on investment, and that spending is not always bad.
Thank you.
So the question is, how do you propose to address the rapid expansion of the deficit? And the first thing that we need to do as Democrats is recognize that we are the party of fiscal responsibility. We are the party of fiscal responsibility, and we need to deliver that message. Bill Clinton left W a balanced budget. Every administration since World War II, the Democratic administrations have done better for the country, and the Republican administrations have done worse. Our military budget is bloated. They asked for $554 billion, which was an increase of about 10% over the former year's budget. They ended up with $700 billion. And we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, always in the context of social programs. Right. What about the military? We can make substantial cuts in the military. And I'm strongly in favor of looking very into our tax structure dramatically. In the 50s, under Republican President Dwight Eisenhower, the top corporate rate, listen to this, 93%. Nobody paid that, because they took their excess profits and they plowed it into their workers. They took the deduction for the wages. American middle class grew astronomically. We all did better. The economy did better. We need to reinstate a progressive tax system so that large corporations pay their fair share. And that's the way we tackle the deficit.
I think the first thing we need to do is send people to Congress who understand what a balance sheet is and understand what fiscal responsibility is. I worked inside of an investment bank. I worked as a management consultant helping companies create jobs. You need folks who actually care about what a balanced budget is and looks like and the impacts on everyday Americans. Here's what we should avoid. We should avoid cutting Social Security. We should avoid cutting Medicare and Medicaid. We need to fight to protect for those things. We do need to address this deficit. We do need a new tax bill. We also do need to address DoD spending. You need folks in Congress who are going to go up against the powers that be that want to keep that DoD budget high. You need folks with credibility. There are 100 young veterans running for Congress this year across the country. Most of us are on the left. And I will tell you, we are angry and we are impatient. We were sent to Iraq and Afghanistan with no exit plans. And we came home to see Washington being ripped apart by career politicians. There was no next generation fighter jet program that was $20 billion and 20 years over budget and over time that saved any of our lives in Afghanistan. It was software, small investments. To go up against the DoD budget is going to require credibility, and it's going to require a background. The other thing is, here's what you can do. Find representatives who are beholden to their donors from corporate PACs. That's why we get nothing done. And here in our district, it's pretty easy. It's a guy named Andy Harris. He's beholden to his donors from the corporate PACs, whether it's the NRA or the pharmaceutical industry. So the best thing you can do is find somebody who fits that description and vote them out. And if you really care about trim and fat from the DoD budget or bringing fiscal responsibility back to Washington, send young veterans to Congress. Thank you.
Very good. So there were a number of candidates we recognized. I think, I'm pretty certain there's another candidate in the room that I'd like you to stand up if you're a candidate for office in Harford County and introduce yourself.
Jawanda Strickland-Lucas, and I'm running for the Register of Wills and for the Democratic Central Committee.
Thank you, Jawanda. And I'll say that this, what you're seeing here, was her vision 20 years ago. So, the next question. I saw one here. The next question. What will you do to end mass incarceration? And this will start down, we'll start Jesse, go for it.
It's a great question. I've asked that. I think the first thing we need to do is understand really what is happening. You need somebody who understands that there's a generation of young African American men with a percentage far too many in jail. And you need to understand that there is an economic incentive with this privatization of prisons, that every incentive is working against us to address this problem. So step one is figure out a way to fight these privatization of jails. Step two is just understand the historic inequities between some of our law enforcement agencies and some of our communities, especially our communities of color. My father has been a public defender in Maryland for my entire life, and you can imagine the race, gender, and age of 98% of his clients. That's what I've learned at the dinner table. My wife served as a police officer in Washington, D.C. As an African American city with an African American police force. My wife happens to be white. It's a different story in Baltimore than it is D.C., but you have to understand it's certainly a different story in Bel Air as it is Salisbury. You talk about something as simple as the 287G program that looks different in Bel Air as it does in Cambridge or Easton or Salisbury. The best thing we can do is find representatives who don't care about this issue at all, who deny the existence of this issue as a problem. We have one here in our district. Andy Harris is never even going to entertain that this is a problem, much less do anything about it. I do not pretend to have all the answers on this topic. It is very difficult for me to get hopeful about how we can make reform on this topic, because I just don't see a lot of light in the next 2 years. But I can tell you the first step. Find somebody like Andy Harris who is never going to give this even a thought or entertainment, much less try to fix it. And send folks in where their hearts are in the right place and understand where to start. The first place to start is with this privatization of prisons. Thank you.
So I have been in the arena and I know what it's like. The U.S. prison population is now 2.2 million. That has increased 500% in the last 40 years. But there hasn't been any corresponding increase in the crime rate. We incarcerate more people than any other nation on earth. We have 5% of the world's population. We incarcerate 25% of the people in prison throughout the world, and that includes China. Federal imprisonment is up 15% in the last 10 years, while state rates have gone down 4%. 32 states have reduced crime and imprisonment over the last 5 years. What can we do about it? First of all, we can take marijuana off the Schedule I drug controlled dangerous substance list. It never belonged there in the first place, and it needs to get removed. We can decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana. We can treat drug addiction and the drug problem as a public health crisis, which is what it is. It's not a criminal justice crisis. 54% of folks in prison today are either in there for drug-related offenses or immigration offenses. Think of that. It's not right. It's disproportionate. It's a disproportionate impact on communities of color. The criminalization of marijuana has been used to create mass incarceration. And we need to undo it. We need to, not only for the social reasons, but for all the reasons that make this country what it needs to become. We need to have justice equal for all. Thanks.
This wasn't a good question to go after these two guys on. They said most of what I would have said, which maybe gives me an opportunity. Yes, we need to fight back against privatized prisons. Nobody should be profiting by incarcerating our citizens. It is a fundamental misalignment of profit motive. Anywhere we see that occurring, we should end it. And then I agree that we need to legalize marijuana. People are being incarcerated for no reason over this. And the states that have done so not only have budget surpluses, but they also have lower rates of opioid-related deaths. And I agree that we need to treat the opioid crisis like a public health issue. And we need to give it the attention that it deserves. So when you declare it a crisis, you need to actually fund it. And it shouldn't be treated as a criminal issue. That impacts a lot of people. But I'd like to expand on what Mike was saying about it disproportionately impacting on communities of color. We need to retrain our police forces because incarceration starts with arrests. And communities of color are seeing higher arrest rates for the same crimes that the police would maybe let somebody else walk off with, that they wouldn't do anything about it. And you know what? I would like to give a shout out to Aravinda for standing up and making sure that people in our own police force and community were addressing that problem. Thank you.
So legalizing marijuana is an easy answer, a problem that clearly exists today, but perhaps the ones that maybe the other candidates don't recognize is we also in this election have an opportunity to elect state's attorneys who believe that there is a chance to reform first-time offenders. So it's not just us and new legislation, but it could be the very people who are in place to prosecute these individuals to have a mentality that says, hey, rough start. Let's give them an opportunity to make things better. And let's put programs in place that they can enable themselves, enable these offenders to find another way out. Perhaps scare them straight, if you will. The judges, in the same respect, also are handicapped. They have certain circumstances where they have mandatory minimum sentences that they can't get around. Now, a lot of this stuff won't occur at the federal level. It'll happen within the state level. So maybe we won't have the answer or the ability to impact it directly. But when you have a minimum sentence that says somebody's stuck for 10 years in jail because of what may be considered a minor felony in many of our eyes, that creates a problem. That puts them in an environment for more longer than their entire education of one where they learn worse things rather than better things. Finally, I'm going to take a moment to recognize that we own the problem. Between our parenting skills and our education system, we have a responsibility to give these people who find themselves in trouble young an opportunity to go out in the world and make a difference, and tell them that they can make a difference in the world doing the positive things and not taking the easy road out. We all have to step up. If we see somebody behaving in a poor way in town, we should say something and not be quiet and be afraid that they're going to come back at us. We have to change in order for our society to change as well, and we're going to have to hold them accountable earlier to avoid a lot of these problems that we see in the future. Thank you.
Very good, and we are going to have our 7th inning stretch. You've got 2 minutes to stand up, shake it off.
I do.
So we touched some healthcare questions before. This one is specific to drug prices, and the question is, would you put patents on the table, like was done for anthrax? So that we would have improved leverage on the prices and reducing the prices of drugs. You got it? We'll start down with Erik Lane. The question was, and then I know that I was lobbied to present this question. But the question addresses the high cost of drugs. It's related to the high cost of drugs. And the question is, would you, candidate, support putting patents on drugs to enable better, to enable the opportunity to leverage the patent and negotiate better prices, reduced prices for drugs?
Is it to break patents? Is that what the question is? Break
patents, yes. Yes. You ready, Erik?
Sure.
So while I can't speak for my counterparts up here, I've been through the patent process a couple of times through the companies that I've started. So I have a strong understanding about how patents work. In this specific case, I think there's some clarification around medical patents that we might need to come to terms with and have an understanding with for this audience. Patents have a
Would you
long
mind actually reading the question? It didn't really make sense. We just say.
That's what I was trying to clarify. Is what I believe the question was really driving at, because I don't know that the question was.
I agree.
Fully.
So he's fleshing it out.
Yeah, I'm just kind of fleshing it out. So you guys. So because I think I heard it right, and I think I know what it meant to ask.
Yep.
So if you don't mind bearing with me for a second, I will carry on and bring you guys up to speed. I think a little bit on the patent process around medicine.
Go for it.
So there's 17, 20 years, depending on the patent, that a drug manufacturer gets to keep and isolate themselves on the market. Some of the games that have been played of late is they do funny things like, oh, it was a pill, it was a dry pill before, and now Congress has components of legislation that allow them to artificially extend that patent for another 3 years. Potentially, because, oh, they changed it to a chewable instead of a dry tablet. So by just changing the method that it can come in, that causes a problem. Other games that are happening in this industry are, well, let's buy out the company that would create the generic so that there is no generic market. Okay, that's a good way to do it. We've made billions of dollars. Well, that company coming in is going to make a lot less money. And if that's the case, then I bet we can entice them with several $100 million to allow us to continue to reign supreme on that particular drug. The games don't end. You can file a court order for someone else who's looking to do a generic to say, oh, but I think that they are copying some other process that is part of this drug program, and then they are automatically on a 30-month delay before they can actually follow through with starting manufacturing of that product. The games don't end. And so in that way, there are things we can do in Congress to end the gamesmanship in the industry. Now, specific to something like anthrax, where, okay, or just drugs that pose such a health challenge, the government does have the opportunity and does have the ability to say, for the benefit of the United States, we're going to mass produce this. And they could say that specific drug is something that is of national interest to put out there. And that could be something you could argue like Noxolone or something, to end the opioid problem. But maybe more specifically, we have challenges within the system that are driven by economics and not by the medical benefit. So we have to continue to work towards finding reasons to eliminate that profit motive and eliminate the gamesmanship that causes all the pain related to cost of drugs.
The question wasn't really about evergreening. That was a great answer. The question was just if a company charges us more than they charge people in other countries for the same product, often a lot more, will we take back that government granted monopoly we gave them?
Which is why, for a brief second, why I said we have to go to a single rate sheet in my opening statements. That's the way that we get out of it, is let Medicaid handles it for services, but let's have an equivalent that gives us a rate sheet around prescription drugs. And President Trump, I'll actually give him credit for this, he did say that he was proposing an opportunity to say that drug manufacturers in their ads will have to put price in the ads as a policy moving forward. That would be fantastic if they said it's $100 a dose.
Excellent. I think we've covered that question and brought some clarity to satisfy it. Would you like to continue down this path with this particular question, or I can move forward, Allison? And
I'm actually happy to expand on this.
Okay, go for it.
So I have a certificate in FDA regulatory affairs, and once upon a time, I was Department of Defense's portfolio analyst responsible for development of all things of the anthrax vaccine. Now, anthrax was developed by our government, and it was done under orphan drug status, meaning that it got fast-tracked, it got expedited, they got certain credits, tax credits, and incentives because it wasn't something that industry was going to invest in on its own, there was not a lot of, not a huge market for it, right? So they saw it as not profitable. Interestingly, Emergent Biosolutions, who is one of Andy Harris's largest donors, owns the patent rights for the anthrax vaccine, and the only way that they would go and manufacture large quantities of it is if we went to war with a country that we believed had chemical or biological weapons.
Wow.
So, you know, there's something. Get Andy Harris out. But yes, we can leverage patents to reduce drug prices. I think that you could look at a way where you revoke patent rights in an area where there's price gouging. Because we know that's happening. And, you know, a lot of companies will go and change formulation to extend patent rights, or they'll expand application, they'll get it approved for a new indication, and then they'll go and they'll extend their patent rights indefinitely. We definitely need to shorten some of these things, especially where government money has been used to develop that drug in the first place. And by withholding that and saying, look, if this is what you're going to do with the market and you're going to overcharge people, then we're absolutely going to revoke patent rights on it, and the government is going to manufacture it itself. But that doesn't require an additional investment on our end that we should be aware of.
So the answer, from my perspective, is absolutely patent rights are on the table, and the reason is that we have a system now that's being gamed, and it's hurting the American public and hurting the American people. We have 5% of the world's population. We pay 60% of the worldwide profit to the pharmaceutical industry. It comes right here from us. We need to be able to negotiate the price of prescription medication the same way that the VA does. We need to change that. We also, our patent system, with small tweaks, corporations can reestablish the patent for another 17 years, and that's problematic. That's not right. A large part of the R&D that goes in to develop these drugs is actually paid for by taxpayers. And then these large private pharmaceutical companies take that research and development and privatize the profit. So here's the scheme. Socialize the risk, socialize the cost, privatize the profit. That's wrong. So Maryland has adopted a great model that we could adopt throughout the country. If a generic comes on the market at a price that shocks the conscience, the Maryland AG can file suit to prevent that. Courtesy of Brian Frosch, our current AG. Great man, great idea. We can do that nationwide, and I would support that.
By a show of hands, who's really happy with the amount of money they have to spend on the prescription drugs? Yeah, I'd work on that idea in relation to patents and anything else that we could do to burn down drug prices. I mean, there's really two things. If you care about this issue, there's two areas. One is we have to fight for Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices. We have to protect the VA. A guy like Ian Harris is trying to privatize and destroy the VA. The VA can negotiate drug prices. It will hurt our veterans. We have 50 to 75,000 veterans in our district, and many of them are your sisters and brothers and nieces and nephews and grandmothers and grandfathers. I think this job is about relationships. I think it's about building relationships across gaps, whether it's age or gender or race or the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. It's also about not having the wrong relationships. For example, the pharmaceutical industry. We have pledged not to take any corporate PAC money ever. And I've also pledged not to take any money from the extraction industries. You want folks in Congress who actually have the ability, because they're not beholden. If somebody takes money from the pharmaceutical industries, they're never going to be able to work on patents or anything else related to drug prices because they're beholden to those corporate PAC donors. Find folks around the country who don't take money from corporate PACs and get them in office.
Thank you. And thank you for the question.
I'm sorry for being rude.
The next question is, what is your position on gun control and the Second Amendment as it relates to assault weapons and high-capacity magazines? And we'll start there.
We just received the Candidate of Distinction recognition for Moms Demand Action, which we're really proud of. Maryland's actually a great place to start. We got it right after Sandy Hook. In part because the activist groups did have a seat at the table. It was not just Moms Demand Action, it was moms, and it was Marylanders Prevent Gun Violence. In my first week on Capitol Hill, I would love to take every colleague I can scoop up from every political stripe, from every part of the country, and go down Route 50 and show what we have here in the books, because we got it right. And it covers everything from high-capacity magazines, to assault weapons, to red flag restraining orders, to background checks. We do need to recognize what we're up against. After Vegas, we thought bump stocks would get taken care of overnight. There is a bump stock bill going through Congress, but Andy Harris and his pals slapped underneath it a bill to get the concealed carry reciprocity bill passed. Which basically, you know what that is. What can we do? There's two things. Number one, these kids from Parkland are going to be the difference. They are the oxygen in this conversation. We have a student group, Students for Jesse Colvin. If you have young people in your life who are energized on this topic, come find us. They're led by our group is led by the sharpest 18-year-old you ever found. The other thing we can do is these military veterans running, there are over 100 of us, we are mostly on the left, and we're going to bring a seriousness and a credibility and a gravitas that our party has just not had on this issue in a long time. And the last thing I just want to say is we're going to talk about gun violence, we're going to talk about opioids. I think it's important to recognize that if you do want to reduce gun violence and you do want to prevent mass shootings, we should understand that certain communities, given the nature of today, suffer gun violence at disproportionate rates, including our own backyards. The two things we can do: give these kids a chance to be the oxygen in the room, send your young people in your life our way, and elect these veterans on the left, because we have a gravitas and a credibility on this topic that our party just has not had in a very long time. Thank you.
So I'm an early and strong supporter of sensible gun regulation, and I too have the Moms Demand Action for Sensible Gun Regulation endorsement, which I'm very proud of. And the reason that I'm in favor of this is it's quite easy to explain. The difference between a wound that you get from a handgun and an assault weapon, the ER docs who treat victims of assault weapons say that it's like a grenade went off inside. There's nothing left to repair. It's like a cigarette boat going through a narrow canal. It spreads that tissue, doesn't even have to hit the artery or the organ to destroy it. And these folks, most of them bleed out. These guns were not made for sport. They're not made for hunting. They're made to kill people. And they're very efficient weapons. The difference between a semi-automatic and a fully automatic, you can discharge 30 rounds from a semi-automatic assault weapon in as little as 5 seconds. On fully automatic, you can discharge that in as few as 3 seconds. Not much difference. Not much difference. And yet the damage that is done is incredible, and it's practically irreparable. So, very, very clear, very, very cogent, very simple. I'm against assault weapons. Maryland has a great model that we can put into effect nationwide. It's been tested in the courts. This notion that are you for the Second Amendment or against the Second Amendment, that's a false frame, and we need to change that.
Yes.
When I got admitted to the bar, I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and I certainly am in favor of the Second Amendment. But that doesn't mean I'm in favor of putting weapons of war on the street. They have no place there, and the courts have said that. So that's my position.
I am also a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense, or have received the MDA Gun Sense Candidate Distinction. And I am the mother of a soon-to-be middle schooler in a public school. And I raised a stepson for over 10 years, and he is at a public high school here. He's 16 now, so stay off the roads. And as a mother, this one is really, really important to me. Actually, my mother was in an active shooter incident at Morgan State University, when, probably a decade ago, something like that. This is a really important issue, and I find it reprehensible that Columbine was almost 20 years ago, and the best we can do is give teachers bulletproof whiteboards. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. And gun violence is an epidemic, and it's not just in our public schools. Now, a lot of that has to do with access. I believe in universal training requirements. If you don't know how to use a gun, you don't need to own a gun, as far as I'm concerned. I believe in mandatory universal background checks, standard, consistent, mandatory reporting into NICS by all states, so that we can actually run thorough background checks on people. And we need to repeal the Tierhart Amendment, which prevents ATF from tracing a lot of these things and prevents local law enforcement from sharing data with ATF easily. And we need to repeal the Dickey Amendment, which prevents us from studying gun violence. And I too have a student group, actually I think it was the first one, that's led by these students who formed and spearheaded the walkouts across this very district. And they know that I will stand with them any day of the week, and that our students and our children and our communities come first. Now, the Heller decision was clear that constitutional rights are not unlimited. We can vote, but we can't vote 10 times in 4 states. But we do need to respect the Constitution. And so I've had a lot of conversations with Second Amendment advocates about all of these things. And I think that there are areas that we can come to agreement with, and that 70 to 80% of the population would actually agree on most of these things. And I think it's important that we work towards that, and that we have a conversation with one another, because I would say that responsible gun ownership is not necessarily the issue. The issue is guns getting into the hands of the wrong people. But if those conversations don't pan out, I will happily vote to ban assault weapons, and I would go to ban bump stocks as well.
So, I think most of us probably recognize that there is a massive lobby that will probably prevent this from hitting the floor for vote, especially in a Republican-held Congress. If there is a switch, then I think, yes, it has a chance of hitting the floor, but recognizing that there's still a powerful lobby that prevents these kinds of things from ever making it through committee. Maryland has the golden model. If it made it to the floor, something similar to that, I would support it. I find it very hard to believe that it's going to happen at a national level. So I think we talk about the power of the pulpit in a position of a congressman. And what we need to do is proudly walk around with the Maryland rule to every other congressman in that body, get invited to those state legislatures, and see if we can't get the political will of that state to take ours as a template and say, it matters to our state. They get to vote whether it's important enough. Here's a template that says how to do it. That template is not going to be as affected by the lobby that controls Congress. They pour a lot of money into Congress. They pour some money into state races. If we change the trajectory of the attack to be at a state level, it really may have a chance. I don't believe that we can remove that influence without fundamental changes in lobbying to do that on the congressional floor. I said at the beginning, my dad's a cop. He's also an NRA instructor. And one of the things that I learned in this process of my dad coming to terms with I'm running for Congress was the people who represent the NRA, the average person who has a membership, they are willing to concede on these issues. But the problem they had in the past, specifically around the Democrats, is that we tend to always go for more. Instead of limiting it, we tend to say, well, while we're at it, let's take more. So I think it's important for us to understand that if we do say it's believed that we can get it through Congress. But as soon as we start saying and, obviously it evokes a panic on the right, and we continue to see the fight. So we need to, like I said in the medical space, we need to take the thing that we can win and win it. And stop trying to fight for the whole pie when all we need is a slice. I think we do that, we have a chance, and I would support taking that slice for our district today. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question. Do you believe that the present Congress has abdicated its oversight responsibility? And how would you ensure that the co-equal branches of government fulfill their constitutional duties? And we'll stay down there with you, Erik.
I think that we've all been watching a Congress that is, if you'll take the ship metaphor for a moment, rudderless. There's no leadership on the Republican side, and frankly, I don't think our leadership on the Democratic side is all that strong either. We keep pushing for things that I don't believe that really are what the country cares for. We care about partisan issues. We hear about identity politics. I think the Republican Party has lost contact with the average American. I think the Democratic Party has lost control of what to do with a checkbook. Those are fundamental, and that comes from leadership. I think that rudderless, spineless thing is all made more chaotic by a president who lives off of the chaos. We can't find a common storyline to say, Americans, we're going to go this direction. What can we get behind? Every week it's a different soundbite that gets us lost in, well, what do I care about now? The next dramatic event that media has decided to take under its wing? I think the people in Congress need to say, all right, we understand the national agenda. Education's important, healthcare is important, long-term pension issues are important, control of our budget's important. Those things, we have an opportunity this cycle to express through our votes that candidates who also believe in those things will come in, find new leadership within their party, and drive America towards a better place for tomorrow. Thank you.
I have no explanation for present Congress. I would just say that they are not working for us, they're not doing their jobs, and it's time to vote them out. People who aren't willing to do their job. I would also say that the issue is one of big money, and not just corporate PACs, not just corporations or PACs or lobbying money, even max donations from individual donors coming out of certain industries are something that we should be concerned about, because if you're spending your time on the phone begging for max donations from the richest people that you know, then you are not spending your time talking to the Americans who are struggling the most, and it suggests that you're probably a little out of touch.
Yes.
We need to remember that we have some likely Supreme Court nominations coming up. And we need to make sure that we control Congress when that happens. And not just that Democrats control Congress, but that the people, we the people, control Congress when that happens. And we need a representative body that looks a whole lot more like the body of people that it represents. Also, we need to get the big money out of politics. Lobbying, big money lobbying from any organization is generally something I'm going to be opposed to, because legislation should be able to stand on its own merits. And what we need is more responsive, more in touch representation in Congress to actually do their jobs.
First part of the question. Do you believe the present Congress has abdicated its oversight responsibility? Andy Harris, Devin Nunes, Paul Ryan. Mitch McConnell. Do I need to say more? Absolutely they have. Absolutely they have. I've dedicated my life to fighting for the rule of law and to fighting for justice. That's what I will do for you in Congress. I am both an honest broker and a zealous advocate. As the county attorney for Talbot County, advising the council, 7 different councils, I dug and I dug and I dug and I did my homework, and I was a straight shooter. I told it like it was, and I defended the rule of law in our county, and I promoted respect for the rule of law in everything that we did. How would you ensure that the co-equal branches of government fulfill their constitutional duties? Number one, we have to defeat Andy Harris. And every one of the people at this table is head and shoulders above Andy Harris. And I will support whatever candidate comes out of this county. And finally, when the Democrats do take the House, Elijah Cummings becomes chair of the House Oversight Committee. He is your champion. He is our champion, and he will hold them accountable.
That's right.
And I hope to be there to help him.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think anyone in this seat, immediately upon getting elected, needs to understand that they're going to have to bring every ounce of energy and courage and rigorous oversight they can to things like the Department of Education, led by Secretary DeVos, and the EPA, led by Commissioner Pruitt. Yes, Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, and I think the most solemn responsibility has to do with international affairs and military operations overseas. I'm a little biased. 4 combat deployments to Afghanistan. I spent a year as an intelligence officer near the demilitarized zone. We were the tripwire. Our life expectancy was about 14 minutes. I have a master's in international affairs from Columbia, so I'm a little bit biased. But think about Congress and the last time you heard Congress and thought about an expertise and an interest in international affairs. It just hasn't been there. This job is federal office. It is the big leagues. You're going to spend the morning working on incredibly crucial and important healthcare bills that are going to have unbelievably important impacts at a place like Upper Chesapeake. And then you got to turn around in the afternoon and you got to have the interest and background and credibility and ability to create relationships on something like the North Korean nuclear crisis. You got to be able to do both, and you got to be able to have the interest and the background and the ability to create relationships in both arenas. So yes, Congress is a co-equal branch of government. What do? You find people with the backgrounds and interest and ability to create relationships in both those things. There's a reason this is federal office. It's the big leagues. And we have so many crises on the international stage right now. When my stump speech, I spent a lot of time in North Korea, and I hope we have a positive outcome, but I understand that this office, and if you care about our sons and daughters going to war in a place like North Korea, think about that as part of your vote. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. You guys have been fantastic. I'd like to take a moment and to recognize one more together, one more time for the gentleman who is really and really gets it done. Thank you, Reverend Tony. Thank you.
So you've already heard from the AADEM's African American Democratic Club. You've heard from Together We Will. On the back of your programs, we're not done yet. Keep the phones off. I'll give Juwan an opportunity to speak on behalf of Voices, and then I'll give a last closing remarks from Bridge Maryland Incorporated, and then we will get on the road and cast our vote. Sound good?
Yes.
All right, Juwanda, is she here?
That was her fault. No, just kidding.
No, it wasn't.
She's here. Hold on, let me go.
All right. Again, we want to thank the candidates for coming out.
Yes.
We do have a little something for you. Don't get too excited. It's just a thank you. There's no money in there. We're all non-profit organizations, so we can't be handing out money. But we can't hand out thank yous. We also wanted to thank you for being prepared. For those of you who were prepared for the questions, it was very clear that you not only got the questions, but you were prepared to give some thoughtful answers, and we appreciate that. Joanna, you got 30 seconds, I got 30 seconds, and then we're going to get out of here. All right. Time is ticking.
Hi, I'm Joanna Strickland Lucas, and I was outside the room, so what do I have 30 seconds for?
Talk about voices.
Okay. Voices for Racial Change is the dialogue group that educates and informs people about the diversity issues, and we also have open dialogue on race so that we learn how to talk to each other. And we also hold seminars on different topics. It is an open forum. All opinions are welcome, and it's a safe place to talk. So we hope to see you. We hope that you will join us. You can see us on Facebook under Voices for Racial Change. So I have one of the members that is looking at me. Is there something else that I'm missing? Okay, good. Okay. Are any members of Voices for Racial Change, please raise your hand that are in the room. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm actually wearing a dual hat. In addition to being the pastor of Ames, I'm also the co-chair of Bridge Maryland Incorporated. We're currently in 7 of the 24 counties in Baltimore City. And let me just read our mission statement. I'll tell you exactly what we're about. Bridge Maryland uses intentional relationship building, organizing, and intensive leadership development to strengthen congregations and faith leaders to demonstrate and advance justice in the world. That's what we're about. We're about bringing groups like this together, organized in a manner where we can have a platform where candidates can give their comments, but more importantly, we're down in Annapolis and city halls and in areas of community of different counties where county councils are taking place, making sure that your needs are being met. And so if you want to know anything about any of these organizations, please look at the back of your programs, contact us, we will reach out to you and make sure that those needs are met. So now if you would stand to your feet. And I'm going to offer us a closing blessing with hopes that if you want to speak to candidates a little bit further, we can, but you only have 5 minutes to do that. And then we want you to head out to the polls and cast your vote. Sound good?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, let us pray. Gracious and wonderful God, we thank you for a wonderful time together. We thank you for the young videographer who was here, for the timekeeper that kept us on task. We thank you for all of the groups that came on today, and more importantly for the citizens who were concerned about justice in our community. So God, as we continue this journey of trying our best to meet the social and active needs of our communities, God, you must guide us in every step of the way. We ask all of this in the precious name of God the Almighty. Amen. Amen. All right, you got 5 minutes with them, and then let's go vote.